Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to World of Tanks Blitz. I will be doing this as a part 2 of my newest garage tour, so we'll be going from tier 6 to 10 because, well, it got too long. So, yeah, I'll just be going through all of my tanks briefly and just explaining about them. So, Fury. I didn't get this when the Fury movie actually came out. This was a later edition. It's generally as an all-round decent tier 6 American medium. Nothing too overly amazing. It's pretty much just an easy 8 with a nice looking skill on it. Of course there are some differences, but overall just a sort of easy 8. This is the Panzer IV S with a TIE Fighter skin, and I'm still upset that they've done the design as a TIE Interceptor rather than a TIE Fighter, because this isn't really an Interceptor skin. If I get it up here and you see what the name changes to, there you go, changes to that, which is an Interceptor skin. Maybe they thought it looked nicer, but honestly, because these side skirts are flat, they're more like the flat solar panels of the regular TIE Fighter, not to mention it's only got 2 laser cannons at the front, here and here, rather than 4 on the wingtips, plus the 2 on the actual bubble canopy. So yeah, that's just a bit weird. Overall though, Schmulterm is a pretty decent tank. It's one of the better armoured medium tanks at tier 6 with a strong turret, especially on the side. You can easily bounce shots off of the side there. The front is 150, but it is flat, but you can obviously easily get people to accidentally hit your gun manlet, which is very nice and sloped, and then that will in turn not penetrate into your actual turret front. Overall also the gun is pretty nice as well, pretty decent rate of fire, decent damage, decent pen. Armour for the hull is not too amazing, and it's a bit sluggish, but then it is just a very weighed down Panzer IV. Loads of Sherman. It's a American tank in the Soviet tech tree because it's a Lend-Lease tank. I can't remember where I got this tank from, but it's a fun enough tank. Like I said in my Fury versus Lozer's Sherman comparison video, it is worse than the Fury in most stats, apart from the gun. The gun is very nice and accurate, but honestly, if you don't really care about that, it's a decent enough tank. It's just nice, and yeah, it's just a nice medium tank, and it looks pretty cool with the special decals that it gets, such as the 936 written on the side and some little bits of writing here and there. T-3485 Victory, got this ages ago. Yeah, pretty rare to see this thing nowadays. Not many people seem to play this tank, not from when I play tier 6 battles at least. But it does have a very nice camo scheme of this nice green and black. It also has the Blitz logo on it with some nice striping. Overall, yeah, just a nice little medium tank. It's pretty much like a T-3485, but yeah, nicer camo. And I think it's got the same top gun as well, so yeah, you're pretty much just getting a top T-3485. AC4 Sentinel. It doesn't have the 17 pounder like on PC. Instead, it just has a regular 75mm Mark V gun, but it's still a pretty nice gun on it. The armor of the tank itself is actually fairly decent for a medium tank. It is fairly thick and sloped to a decent degree at the front, so you can sort of bounce shots off that. And also the turret is also pretty annoying to penetrate. You can only really easily penetrate through these side bits of the front of the turret, and you can also bounce shots off the side as well if they hit them at a wrong angle. And yeah, the gun is pretty decent. You know, just tier 6 British medium tank gun on this Australian tank. Yeah, I think I got this in the bundle with the AC1 at tier 4. So yeah, overall just a fairly decent tank. Cromwell B, of course, everyone knows. This thing is probably if you were to ask someone what is the most OP medium tank at tier 6, they'd by good chance say Cromwell B, because I believe it's better than the regular Cromwell in most ways. It looks cooler for one, unless you have the football skin on the other Cromwell, but even then you don't get all of the nice little additions, such as the spare road wheel up there, the jerry cans on the side, the little bit of furnishings everywhere. And yeah, it's very fast, very mobile, very nimble. Sometimes you can bounce shots, but it's not reliable. Obviously, you can bounce off the frontal upper glacis part here, but otherwise 75mm at the front, you can easily go through that. And the turret, but again, you can also bounce shots off the turret. It's a bit of a troll armor profile. You know, when you get those shots going, what was that? Chances are they'll bounce off a medium tank, but overall, yeah, very mobile, very fast, very rapid fire medium tank, pretty annoying. If it gets around you, you are pretty much dead, because there's no way you're going to keep up with this thing. The same as the regular Cromwell, really. Churchill Mark 6, not a lot of people like the Churchills at the mid-tiers, and I can understand that. However, I of course do love myself some Churchills, and this is, well, this is the 4th Churchill in the game now. It's the most recent Churchill to be added, if you don't count the Black Prince as a Churchill, in which case we've got 5 if you do. But this is the most recent Churchill to be added. It's basically a Mark 7 Churchill, except slightly different. It has got a different gun on it. It also looks a bit different, obviously, as well. It's very reminiscent of the Churchill in Company of Heroes 1, which is a Mark 4 Churchill, because the turret reminds me a lot of a Mark 4 Churchill, even though it's a Mark 6 turret, but because of the rounding and shaping, it reminds me a lot of the Mark 4. But even so, it plays pretty much like your regular old Churchill. Armour layout is a bit different, I think. 176 at the front of the hull, and turret, yeah, just your general. It's, yeah, just your regular old Churchill, nothing too much to say about it. If we're then to skip ahead to the Mark 7 Churchill, as you can see here, they both have got 152. The Mark 6 has got worse side armour, but overall, yeah, they're pretty much the same. And of course, I do love myself some Mark 7 Churchill as well. Pretty heavily armoured, and the armour is actually a flat plate. It's not like the Churchill 1 where it's only a little strip. This is actually full 152 right here. People don't like the Churchills because you can penetrate through the road wheel, or through the front wheel here. You can pen through that to track them and do damage, and you can pretty much just keep on doing that infinitely until they die, which is why people don't like the Churchill, amongst other things. But yeah, just generally a nice heavily armoured heavy tank, infantry tank, and yeah, overall, yeah, I just like the Churchills. One Churchill I don't like though, gun carrier. It was removed from the tech tree with update 5.5, and I think out of everything that was removed, this is the one that people didn't miss. It is a terrible tank destroyer. The only good thing about it is the gun depression and the gun. The gun is a very nice, very good gun. Was it 212 pen at tier 6, which is amazing. Easily get through probably tier 8 tanks with that sort of pen, but obviously +1 -1 blitz matchmaking, you only see tier 6s and 7s and 5s. Reload time is not too bad. Penetration and damage is pretty decent. Accuracy as well, it is alright. But everything else about it is absolutely terrible. No gun traverse, no armour. The armour actually got buffed. It was 88, it's now 130, but even so, it still isn't stopping anything. This is a weak spot, this is a weak spot, this is a weak spot. It's all just a weak spot. You're very unlikely to bounce things unless you are ridgelining it, because you can do that with -10 gun depression. However, it only has 5 degrees of gun arc either way, which means that you pretty much have to turn the tank constantly. It's a bit like playing a Sturv 103, or the S tanks in PC, where you have to constantly be traversing the hull. It's like that with the gun carrier, and it is pretty terrible, but I love it all the same. Talking of that, TOG. How can you not love the TOG? It has the same health as a tier 8 heavy. With improved assembly, it has 1600 health. Nearly 1650 health. There are tier 8 tanks that have less health than that. And it's just a TOG. It is a massive bullet sponge, massive shell sponge. The armour, you can occasionally bounce things. I have bounced things in the TOG, but honestly, you're not likely to bounce off of it. The gun is very nice, however, it is a 17-pounder. If people let themselves to be shot by you just constantly, if they don't pop out of cover, if they will just sit there and tank shots from you, they will die very quickly, because it has got a very rapid rate of fire, it has got good pen, and yeah, the damage racks up pretty quickly. And how can you not like it? It's a TOG. Yes, it's slow, and yes, it's terrible, but it's a TOG. Everyone loves a TOG. I don't like the Sturv, however. Sturv 74A1, I think it's not that great of an autoloader. The 12T is probably a better autoloader than this thing. The armour is 76 frontal turret, 76 frontal hull, 63 side and rear. For the hull, it's not that great. I just found it was too sluggish to really work as a proper circling medium tank when I did my gameplay on this thing ages ago. And yeah, the accuracy is... what is the accuracy? 0.32. Accuracy is decent, aim time is not so much. Pen is 142, which is That's using calibrated shells, so if I took off calibrated shells, it's what, 135, which is sort of mid-range, but still towards the lower range of medium tank penetration at this tier. Auto-loading, it takes about, I think it's 2 seconds in between each shell, and then it's about a 12-second full magazine reload time. Without, you don't get adrenaline for those people that like using adrenaline. And overall, yeah, it's just a bit of a weird tank. It was the first, Swedish tank into the game, and so of course it was put into the hybrid nation tree. I don't think they've changed that either. I think it's still the hybrid nation tree. But yeah, overall, I didn't really much like it as a medium tank. I got it from one of the Blitz fairs, I think it was, and so yeah, got it from the Blitz fair at some point, and yeah, there was that. Sam Jackson. I like the legendary camo on it. It is the other tier 6 turreted American tank destroyer, and it's got the same turret and hull as the Hellcat. Well, a slightly different turret, but similar enough. It's got the same sort of gun mantlet, same gun, still same, I think it's 16 degrees of turret traverse. The only difference between this and the Hellcat, well, the major difference between this and the Hellcat is that this thing has actually got some semblance of armour. You can actually bounce shots off of your front like you can in the Wolverine. Front and sides you can bounce off of, but of course it's not that reliable. Your turret is of course the strongest point of the tank. The gun mantlet is pretty difficult to get through, and the sides of the turret, because of how much they're sloped, can be tricky to penetrate through as well. So obviously the hull is the weak spot. Unlike the Hellcat, which can be penned very easily with HE, with I think it's 12mm of hull armour. It is terrible. Of course, the side is not quite as easy to pen because it is mostly track. The tracks will eat the HE shell. Even so, Splash will do a lot. But Sam Jackson, they both have got nice 90mm guns. They're with pretty decent accuracy, decent pen, very nice damage. I think it's the same as an 85mm, so it has got 200-ish average damage, which is very nice. At this tier, obviously this is the far more mobile one, which is why people like playing it a lot, but the legendary camo on this thing is pretty nice though. 3201M VK, I call it the prototype Panther. It was removed in update 5.5 as well, so it's a good thing I got this before it was removed, because I always kind of wanted it. Obviously it led to the Panther before getting removed and replaced with something else that I can't be cared to look up. Overall, it's a fairly decent tank. It doesn't have any sort of good armour. It has 30mm at the front, 20mm at the side, I think, of the hull. It is, of course, sloped, but honestly, it goes up to about, what, 50, 60mm, which is nothing at this tier. Most things will get through you at most ranges. You're very unlikely to bounce things unless they hit at a very extreme angle like this. The gun is decent, however. The mobility is also not that bad either. It's just a fun medium tank to drive around because, of course, you're not going to see that many of them, because I don't think many people actually had this tank before it was removed. So, yeah. I enjoy it. I think it's a pretty nice, it's a nice stepping stone towards the Panther. Right? It is basically a prototype Panther. 131, compared to the Kuro, is slightly worse. However, it is the more historically accurate, as you might say, with the skin and the look in comparison to the Tier 7 Tiger. Yeah, very nice skin. Gun is alright. Has got 145 pen, which is for an 88, considering the 88's reputation in real life. However, yeah, it is still a Tier 6 Tiger. You will do very well in this if you know how to play the Tiger. Yeah, if you know how to play the Tiger, you will do perfectly fine in this. Compared to the Kuro, it is slightly worse in terms of mobility, and I think gun as well was slightly worse as well. But overall, yeah, if you don't like the look of the anime Kuro, you'll find this a perfectly servable Tier 6 Tiger instead. I'm just waiting on the heavy tank number 6 to come into the game, the Japanese Tiger, because surely they've got to bring that in at some point and bring us up to 4 Tigers to match our 4 Churchills. The 3601H, I only got this thing for the football camo. However, it is a pretty strong tank, heavy tank, very good armour. The gun itself is a pretty nice 75mm. You can, of course, mount the 88, but it does lose out in a bit of pen for most things. Actually, you get worse DPM, worse aim time, worse dispersion in comparison to this thing, which has got a 5.5 second reload time. Very good pen, very decent damage, 8 degrees of gun depression. Overall, yeah, just a very strong medium tank, heavy tank. A lot of people do like playing this tank because it has got pretty strong frontal hull armor. and I believe it was one of the contenders for the Tiger before they actually settled on the Tiger. So that's some historical context for the VK. Yeah, overall just a pretty strong heavy tank. Nashorn, one of the other German Tier 6 tank destroyers. Again, mounts a very nice 88mm. I believe this is the long 88, so you do actually get 203 mils of pen with it. Yeah, 203. So this is the long 88. A very thin tank, can easily be penned by high caliber, high explosive, such as from the 88mm, etc., etc. You can easily get through the sides, not so much the front, but of course hit the gun shield, and yeah, well, there you go, there's your pen with your HE. Very flimsy, very fragile, but it does have decent camo, I do believe. And yeah, overall just a pretty fun tank destroyer. A bit like the Jagdpanzer. Not a lot of people, I believe, like the Flat Panzer, as some people call it. But honestly, it is very sneaky. It's fairly mobile, based on the Panzer IV chassis. Mounts an 88mm or a 75mm. 75mm does have better dispersion, but even so, the dispersion on this thing is 0.33, which is still very nice. Reload time is slightly more, and the average pen is 5mm less, but it does have better average damage. Only 5 degrees of gun depression. Nope, didn't want to do that. Only 5 degrees of gun depression. Armor, however, it will serve you. You can bounce shots off of your frontal armor here. Lower glacis is obviously a weak spot. However, yeah, very sneaky tank destroyer. Very easy to hide in bushes or behind rocks. And overall, yeah, I don't know why people don't like this tank. Quite honestly, I think it's a nice tank destroyer. T-34-85, just your general Russian medium tank. Yeah, not much to say about it. I do have to admit the Type 58 is slightly better, but even so, this is still a very fun medium tank. The main difference between this and the Type 58 is the gun. The Type 58 does have a better reload time, but for worse pen, whereas this thing does have better pen for worse reload time, which of course affects the DPM. But overall, yeah, you can still bounce shots off of this thing like you can with the T-34s at Tier 5, and overall, yeah, just a pretty decent medium tank. Might as well go over the Type 58 as well. It's just the Chinese copy. Unlike the Type T-34, this thing has actually got decent gun depression, which makes it a whole heck of a lot better to drive. Honestly, if you're not too worried about DPM or penetration, the only difference between this thing and the T-34-85 is the camo. Which camo pattern do you prefer, the Chinese camo or the Russian camo? That's really what you're asking yourself. Overall, yeah, they're just both a nice, decent pair of medium tanks. KV-2, good old dirt machine. I do like the camo on this thing. I think it's called the KV-2... I can't remember, actually. Let's just check it. What does it change the name to? Change the name to KV-2 Menacing. There you go. Yeah, pretty nice dark red camo with a nice fist on the side of the turret. It is of course a massive weak spot. It is a massive profile to hit. Derp gun obviously is the reason why people play this tank. If you want to have a good heavy tank, you go with the 107, because the 107 KV-2 is actually a very good tank, but of course no one drives it like that because everyone uses the derp gun, the big old 152 howitzer for one-shotting tanks, which is of course very fun. But like I said, if you want to actually get stuff done, the 107 is the better way to go about it, because it's the better gun to use on the KV-2. It has just better generally everything except for damage. But of course people play this thing for the derp, and well, you know, it's the derp gun, what can you expect? The Thunder, the first Mission Marathon type tank, which was in the Operation Onslaught event, and it is a decent tank. It is basically a KV-1S. What you've got here, it's got a big 122, which does decent damage and decent pen, but it does have a 17-second reload time, which is killer. However, it does have some nice other bits to it. I believe this is better than the regular KV-1S, but don't quote me on that. The stars glow when you drive in battle, which is a nice little add-on. It also has a nice pintle-mounted machine gun for anti-aircraft, and it also has some nice writing and decals on it. And overall, yeah, just a pretty decent general heavy tank at this tier. Yeah, if you play your KV-1S, you'll like this thing if you have it. Sherman Firefly. There was recently a new Girls and Panzer Firefly released, the Saunders one, but this is the original Firefly. Overall, yeah, decent medium tank, very nice 17-pounder. You can kind of work this thing as a tank destroyer if you wanted, because it is fairly sluggish for a medium tank. It is, you know, one of the slower moving mediums, probably in comparison to the Panzer IV-S, if you want to go off of that as a basis. However, yeah, the gun on this thing is very nice, very good pen, decent enough damage. It's your regular old 75, 76 mil gun. Armour is you can bounce things, but don't rely on it. Obviously, it's a tier 6 medium. The only other things then is the P4306 anniversary for the Blitz 6 years, which we are currently still in, apparently. Yeah, it's just a P43 but slightly better, I do believe. Mounts a 90mm gun, has got a nice camo. If you like playing your P43, you'll enjoy playing the P4306 anniversary. There's not really too much difference between them. And yeah, it's just, I haven't actually played it yet. Don't know if you can tell. But yeah, it seems to be a pretty decent medium tank. As for the Wi-Fi Firefly, it's another 6 years anniversary, but I got this in the 5th year of Blitz anniversary, actually. So, yeah, I didn't get this thing this year, I got it last year. I thought it would mount a 17-pounder like the Firefly, but no, it just mounts a regular old 75, 76mm gun, which is a bit sad, but considering it is basically otherwise a Firefly, just more mobile, because it is a Cromwell chassis, but with a Firefly turret. Yeah, I suppose it would be a bit OP to mount this thing with a 17-pounder. But there you go. Even so, it is just a decent medium tank, however. It is in the Hybrid Nation tree as well. So that's all the tier 6s. As for tier 7s, we've got a whole new row to go over. T-23-3 was a Clan Wars reward tank in PC, so of course I got it on here because there are no Clan Wars, I don't believe. So of course anyone can just get this thing. So overall, it is I wasn't expecting to like this thing because I didn't like driving medium tanks, and I still am not the best at driving medium tanks. However, the gun is very, very quick to fire. Penetration, however, is pretty terrible. 160 average pen at this tier is not that great, but it is very mobile, and it does have about a 3-second reload time-ish. So, of course, you can use Adrenaline Boost, you can use Cola and Crated Cola, and your reload time goes down to 3.37. With Adrenaline, goes to about every 3 seconds, maybe even sub 3 seconds, which for doing 160 average damage, that's pretty quick. It can easily tear through the sides and rears of people, which is the fun of this thing. But otherwise, the armour is nothing. It does have a cool legendary camo, but overall, yeah, otherwise it's just not that great of a tank. So yeah, there's that T-28 HTC, one of the, I think, so far this is the last special American tank to be released for Independence Day. Right now they've just been releasing old tanks, and new different camos. This is the last one to actually get a dedicated Independence Day camouflage, and it is a decent tank. I believe not many people like it on PC, but then that might be to do with power creep. But on Blitz is a very strong tank destroyer. It has got very decent gun arc, and the frontal armour is 200mm, which means that when you're poking around a corner and you've got your gun at your max arc, which is over here, there's nothing at this tier which can penetrate you, and it is great fun to just have everyone bouncing off you, because the weak spots are here and here, but obviously get a building in between you and the enemy, poke your gun around the corner. With your gun arc, you can easily pen people, you can easily shoot at people, and they can't hit you back, because the only way they can really do it is try and damage your hull through your wheel, which isn't guaranteed because of the double layer of track. And overall, yeah, very strong tank destroyer. I do enjoy it. I do like the 4th of July camo, traitorous colonials. But yeah, it is not invulnerable, obviously. If people do get around your side and rear, there is no way you're keeping up with them. It is very immobile. But the gun arc and the gun is pretty decent as well. So overall, there's a lot of strong points to go with this thing. 4503, I didn't like this tank much on PC. On Blitz, it's got the same armor as the Tiger, so you can kind of work it a bit like a Tiger, but you can't really side scrape it as much, I found. It is sort of like Again, I call it a prototype Tiger 2, but it isn't really, I don't believe. Obviously, it does look a lot like a Tiger 2, and it might well have been the prototype Tiger 2, I don't know. I just refer to it as the prototype Tiger 2 because that's how it looks. Armour, yeah, not that great like I said. Gun, however, very good. It's got the long 88, which is obviously the better 88. 200 mils of pen at tier 7 is pretty decent. You can, obviously, I said bounce shots off of you, but it's not as reliable as a Tiger because it's not flat sloped and it's not as clean cut as the Tiger. But overall, it's still a fairly fun heavy tank, I do have to admit. Tankenstein, I recently did a video on this thing because people were like, oh, use the 105. No. You use the 130 on this thing. If you're playing it with the 105, you're doing it wrong. The 130 has got that big alpha damage. It's got the most alpha damage at this tier, apart from like the 152s. If you're using premium rounds got to something like 530 average damage, which you can get up to 600 plus damage in a single shot if you high roll with premium. That's the reason you drive the Tankenstein. Overall, it's not that great of a heavy tank. You have got 200 mils of frontal armor. It is a Tiger P chassis, however, it is very slow. I got this thing when it was first introduced into the game about 5-6 years ago for the first ever Halloween event that they did. You could pay gold to skip the levels. It was one skip per day, and I only just clutched it out, but it's a good thing I did because I do love this tank. I love this tank even back then, when the mobility was about half as good as it was now, so take that as you will. Head back in time in my channel and you'll see some of the early videos of this thing before it got the buff, and you can see just how terrible the mobility of this thing was. And also, because the Tiger P wasn't buffed at that point, these side cheeks were still 80 mil rather than 200 like they are now. So yeah, weak spot was right there and right there, even though it was 200 at the front. 150 frontal turret, which isn't that bad. People can pen through the top turret, however I've had a surprising amount of people bounce off of that top turret, so it's not as easy as you might think. And the gun is pretty inaccurate, but when you hit those shots, it is glorious. It is a very fun tank. It's not for everyone, but it is a very fun tank, especially with the 130. E25 got this thing because it had the legendary camo. Very sneaky tank destroyer. Recently got a penetration buff, actually, so it fires APCR and heat instead of AP and APCR, I think is what it used to be, but it got the buff up to 194, which was a very nice change. Yeah, very, very sneaky, very, very annoying, very low profile, very rapid fire gun, I do believe, still. Yeah, 3.2 second reload time, and it's, yeah, very mobile, very annoying tank destroyer to try and deal with. Very fun, however. And it does get the number 1 camo, which is very nice. ISU 122S, it is, yeah, basically an ISU 152 but with a 122. Very rapid fire 122 as well. It has about 7.4 second reload. Which is very nice. You can easily pump out a lot of damage very quickly if you get this thing into a good position. So any of your normal ISU sniping positions will do well here, because yeah, the gun is decent. It's pretty inaccurate though, I believe, for a 122. 0.39 dispersion, which for a tank destroyer is not that great. However, you can kind of make it work. The armor is, you know, well, it's your usual ISU armor. It's not that great. People can easily pen through your frontal armor if they just have the pen. You can, of course, bounce things off your side if you want, but overall not that mobile. The gun is obviously the main point of it. Pretty rapid fire, and it looks pretty cool as well. You do get the logs, you get the nice guards camo on this thing. M4 FL10, my first experience with the Italian style autoloaders, where they're sort of semi-autoloaders, so they don't have a magazine, they kind of have a magazine, but it auto-replenishes itself over time. Everyone knows how the Italian autoloaders work, I'm not going to go into it here. But this is basically an M4 Sherman with a French oscillating turret on it. Gun depression is terrible, however the gun is pretty nice, and overall it kind of works. You think it wouldn't, because it's just an M4 Sherman with a French oscillating turret on it with a weird auto-loading Italian type gun. But overall, yeah, it's a very fun tank to play. If you can get a hold of this thing, do, because I can't remember where I got a hold of it, but I'm very glad I did, because it looks cool. And also I have this weird camo on it. Yeah, this thing, Woodland Ranger. Can't remember where I got it from, but it's a funny looking camo, and it kind of works on this tank. Overall, yeah, the autoloader mechanism works on this tank pretty well, and it's a very fun tank to drive as well, so if you can get a hold of it, do. Gravedigger, very fun to burst out about 500 damage with this thing. I believe the gun is listed as a nail gun. Yeah, it's a nail gun because it was one of the Halloween tanks. They sort of introduce new Halloween tanks every year. Penetration is not that great, damage is not that great either, 90 pen, because it is a 57 mil gun, which is not that great actually at this tier, but it does have a six shot autoloader, and the shells fire off very quickly. So if you can get the sides of tanks, or if you can just find a weak spot and easily pen, you can easily do about 500 damage in a short amount of time, which is very nice. You can kind of bounce things off of this tank as well. It is very nicely sloped. The turret as well, you can easily bounce all sorts of off here. Weak spot is there. Weak spot is also the cheeks, like the mouse. Lower glacis as well, if they can see past you. Funny thing here, I don't think this actually does extra ram damage either, which is a bit of a shame, but it does shoot fire out of the exhaust, so you have got that, and it does look very nice as well. All of the Halloween tanks look pretty nice, and overall, yeah, just a very fun tank. Not as OP as it used to be, but now that people have figured out what to do with it. But when this thing first came in, it was very OP, but now not so much. The Mutant. This was introduced in an event as well, and I got this thing and the experimental, and it is a very nice tank. If you want to play a tank in style 105, just play this thing, or a T20, was it T29? Play either one of those, because they both have got 105s. 105 is pretty decent. Hull armor is very, very strong as well. You can't really angle that much because the sides are very weak. It is an M6. It is basically a buffed frontally armored M6. The turret, you can pen, but it is very difficult. You can only really pen in a very thin strip right here. That's all you can really pen from the turret. Otherwise, it just bounces off. You can, of course, pen through the upper hatch, which is one of the biggest weak spots, and probably the place you'll get penned the most. If you try and over-angle, they will go through, I believe, this cheek, or just the side armor, because the side armor is 38? No, 44. 44 frontal side hull armor, but 191 frontal armor on both. It is very good. The gun as well, 10-second reload, decent enough pen, decent enough damage. It is just a very fun tank to drive, and a very strong heavy tank. So if you want a heavy tank to do well in, this will be your thing. Panther, can't go wrong with the Panther. It has got the meme gun, aka the clown gun. Some people refer to it as, aka the L175mm, which has got very, very good pen. It's got something like 194 pen, which for a medium tank is very, very good. Very good accuracy, very rapid rate of fire. You can easily get out a lot of damage very quickly with this tank. You can also kind of bounce things off of the frontal hull, but it's not reliable as it is on the 5/4, say, at tier 5. Obviously it has got the Schmalterm turret, so you can kind of bounce things off of your side, off the side of the turret, or off the frontal gun mantlet. Otherwise people will pretty easily just be able to pen through you. It works well as a sniper, works well as a secondary line medium, really. But it is, however, a very fun tank to play. And it's not quite what you're expecting when you go to play the Panther. You're thinking it to be OP. It's not. Because it's actually put against opponents that can damage it, unlike in the war. But yeah, overall, just a pretty fun medium tank. Tiger 1. Can't go wrong with the Tiger. Very good at side scraping. I do love myself my Tiger. I've got the Gamescom 2016 skin, which is nearly 5 years old now. Which is crazy to think about. I've had this tank for like 4 or 5 years. I've also got my ladder attachment, which is all very, very nice. Yeah, I would like to say I'm pretty good in the Tiger. You can easily side scrape this tank, get yourself there, and you can just bounce things off your side. You can kind of bounce things off your front, but of course the lower glacis is the big weak spot. A very good gun, 5.5 second reload time, with very good pen. Very mobile as well, far more mobile than it should be. I've seen some people describe it as a heavium, a sort of combination heavy-medium tank, which I suppose it kind of is. But overall, yeah, just a very, very fun heavy tank, very good heavy tank as well. Sort of like the Tiger P, although the Tiger P is not as mobile. It does, however, have better frontal hull armor, same side armor, same gun with, I think, the same reload time. Let me check that. 5.5 second reload time. It's basically the same gun, basically the same turret. The only difference is the hull, not quite as mobile, and it's also bigger. But it does still have 80mm of side armor and at least 200mm of frontal armor, and it's a comparison to the Tiger, honestly. There's not too much difference between the two of them apart from their looks and the better frontal hull armor. Overall, just, yeah, pretty good heavy tank. Jagdpanther, another tank that not a lot of people seem to like, but overall I think it's a very nice gun. Very nice gun and a very nice tank. Probably the 105 is actually the better thing to go for now that I'm looking at it. I always went with the 88 because it has got the 0.3 dispersion with a 2.8 DPM. This thing you lose out on DPM, but you do get better damage. Still good dispersion. But yeah, ignoring the gun for now. I know that not a lot of people like the Jagdpanther, or at least I don't think there are a lot of people who like the Jagdpanther, and I don't know why, again, because it's a pretty good tank destroyer. You keep it at range, you poke your enemies full of holes with your 105 or 88, subject to how you prefer it. Armour, you can kind of bounce things off of your armour as well, especially if you're like coming over a ridge. You don't have that great gun depression, which is probably a turn off for some people as well. But I mean, it's a big old historic tank destroyer, and honestly, I do like it. It's a decent tank. I think more people should like it, if I'm honest. The IS-2. This thing is not as good as it used to be. Honestly, I do still like driving it. However, it is sluggish and compared to like the regular IS in the Russian tree, the IS-2 in the Chinese tree, or the IS-2 in the Pravda, in the the IS-2 Pravda, which is the newest IS-2 to be released into the game. The differences between these things is that this thing is better. It's far more mobile. It's got the same gun, but I think better. It also has slightly better frontal hull armor for whatever reason. This thing is your more historical one again. However, I don't know whether they're trying to mimic the historical mobility of this thing by giving it a worse engine, but overall it's just not as fast to move. It does, however, still retain all of the good old IS-2 qualities. You can bounce things off of your frontal hull armor. You have got the big 122, which has got the 175 average pen. I still do like driving it. However, the Pravda is just the better tank to go for if you want to play well in an IS-2, and you don't have the regular IS or the Chinese one. So if you're looking for an IS, get this thing if you want to do better in comparison to the Berlin. However, the Berlin does, again, have the nice guard skin, and it does just look generally better in comparison to the white sort of snow camo of the Pravda. The FE201, a bit of a meh tank in PC. You can kind of say it's a bit of a meh tank in Blitz as well, but it does have a very nice 17-pounder, although the 17-pounder is losing its charm. It is losing its charm at tier 7 in comparison to tier 6 or tier 5. Armour is not that great. It is 88 at the front of the hull, but even so you're not likely to bounce that much off of it. It is fairly mobile, but not that great. It's an all-round tank. It does its job competently, but not to any sort of degree of good, I think is the best way of doing it. It is just a generally all-round serviceable heavy tank. Is the best way of putting it. You do get the nice Union Jack skin, although it's only the Union Jack when it's at sea. Otherwise it is known as the Union flag, technically. But yeah, it does get, other than this skin, if you don't like this skin because it's too convoluted, then you're probably not going to like this tank. I do, however. Challenger is a bit it's just sort of the worst of the new to date line of British tank destroyers. It's just sort of like a medium, but not. Anything it can do, a Comet can do better at this tier. Honestly, it either gets a 17-pounder or a 20-pounder. 20-pounder loses out in DPM. This thing gets better DPM, but even so, it just doesn't do anything amazingly. It does everything competently, apart from the turret reverse, which is terrible because it's a turret to tank destroyer. But overall, if you want to drive this tank, just drive a Comet, and you'll get pretty much the same or better experience than this thing. I don't really see the point of anyone owning this thing, other than to grind out towards the Charioteer and towards the FV 4004? I don't know. 87, the only thing I have this thing for is the meme gun. The auto-loading 6-pounder. That's the only reason I have this thing. Otherwise, it's just a bit of an air tank destroyer. The armour has hardly changed from tier 5. It's got exactly the same armour as the 82, except with more weak spots, namely this thing, and this thing. The armour is not as good at this tier as it was then. At tier 5, obviously, it's impenetrable, but at this tier, premium rounds can go through this thing now frontally, so your frontal armour is not as great. Again, the only reason I have this thing for is the 10-round auto-loading meme gun. That's the only reason anyone should really have this tank. It does get a decent selection of guns, but that's down to your personal preference. Type 62 Dragon, I got this thing one of the Blitz fairs. I think it was like 3 years ago, Blitz fair. Yeah, it's a very mobile light tank. Does get a nice camo on it. The 85mm gun is, it's alright. It obviously won't take out anyone really frontally, especially not heavy tanks, but overall it does have decent pen values. And of course the mobility is very nice as well, and the skin is the real reason why people get this tank, I feel, because the skin is very nice, obviously. 1375, I just like the 1375. I don't know why. I don't do particularly well in it. I haven't played it that much, but it does get a nice ladder attachment. There you go. Oscillating turret, 75mm gun, leading on to the 1390, which I do want to get at some point. Not that I can really play these light tanks, but there you go. The French skin, the French camos also look pretty nice. I do like this particular one on the 1375. So yeah. That's just a 1375 Predator, one of the 2 Warhammer vehicles introduced in McCragg's Thunder, I think it was, the event, which was the event 2 or 3 years ago, before Halloween. It is the better out of the 2, I do feel. It is a massive target, it has got no gun depression, people get to your sides, there's nothing you can do about it. It does have a 90mm autoloader though, which can do around 600 damage with a single magazine, which is pretty nice. The armour is very weird. This is a weak spot, but this thing will bounce. These things don't count as hitboxes. The guns on the side, what are they? Heavy bolters, probably. Knowing with my very limited amount of Warhammer knowledge. This thing is obviously the weak spot. Overall, though, it's the better out of the 2. It's still not particularly great. It's just the better out of the 2. Only really get this thing if you're a collector like me. The Lycan, however, is a very good heavy tank. It does get a 122, the same as all of the Russian things at this tier. Got a pike nose like the IS-3. The weak spot is of course the lower glacis, just like the IS-3, but you can otherwise bounce things off of your pike nose. It looks very nice with the night camo, which is what I've got here. I would show you it without it, but I can't be bothered. Yeah, the gun is fairly decent. It looks very, very nice, which is the real reason you get these tanks, which is for them to look nice in your garage, and indeed on battle. Otherwise, though, it is a very good heavy tank, though. It's not just looks nice. The Blaze WZ I have a very weird relationship with. It's meant to be a tank destroyer, but I never use it as a tank destroyer because it always seems to do better as a peekaboo medium. The armour is pretty terrible. The gun is not a tank destroyer type gun. It's got very bad accuracy, and it reloads in about 12 seconds, being a 122. Yeah, sort of an open top tank destroyer, but honestly I find it works much better as a medium tank because it just has the speed and mobility and no armour like a medium tank to really just deal with the medium tanks. Well, I suppose in a pinch you can use this thing as a tank destroyer, but honestly it's far more fun to play as a medium. Vindicator is just not fun. It looks cool. It's the better looking out of the 2 because it does have the big old bulldozer blade, which does stop HE and heat. The frontal armor profile is not as bad as it used to be. You can bounce things off of this and here, but everything will go through your frontal, will go through the hatch, everything will go through the side. There's a strip here where the bulldozer blade sort of connects to the hull. In this strip here, you can go through. It's a very weird armor profile, honestly. It's got no mobility. Well, it's got decent mobility in terms of speed, but traverse is not that great. It only fires heat and HE. If it had AP, it might be better. But honestly, if you want a derp gun like this, go for an ISU or an SU. It's basically a better tank than this thing. It has better all-round armor, better everything in comparison to this thing. Helsing, though, very nice, fun twin-barreled tank destroyer. Fires them both simultaneously, so it goes bang bang with a slight delay for the second one. Can do 400 damage with a 10-second reload, but if you only pen one, you're doing 200 damage for a 10-second reload, which is not that great. Armor is a bit troll. It's fairly mobile as well. You can sort of roll around with your mediums if you wanted to, because you can kind of work it as a tank destroyer, but because of the dispersion between the 2 shells as they fly, not the most reliable tank destroyer. It works pretty decently as a medium tank though, if you wanted to. And overall, yeah, it's just a fun tank. It's not as OP as the Dracula, but it's still up there for most people's lists. Now we got another big one. This will be the last big one though, and then we'll wrap it up with my smaller pool of tier 9s and 10s. Mutant Experimental, just a better mutant. Good, still has good frontal armor. It does get the 120mm, the same as the T-34. Yeah, it's still a big target, but it does have good armour for bouncing those heavy tanks. Very good frontline heavy. Again, same old side, rear, weak spot of the hatch as well. Not too much to say about this thing. T-34 Independence. I got this thing when it was first released for Independence Day, which was something like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. And I didn't really know how to play it, but now that I've come back to it, I've sort of figured out how to play it now, and it is a good tank. It is a good tank. In PC, back like 10 years ago, this thing used to be a tier 9 tank destroyer before it was bumped down to a tier 8 heavy premium tank, which is how it's remained ever since and how it came into Blitz. I know that some people will be turned off by the camo, but if you don't like the camo but want a T-34, good news for you, there is a T-34 in the regular tech tree. How do I have 2 T-34s? This thing is classed as a special tank. It's classed as a completely new vehicle, not just as a camo skin. Whereas other things, such as the Ding camo for the Type 59, for example, or the Liberty camo for the AMX M449, are counted as special camos. This thing is classed as a special tank. Same as the Jagdtiger, the Jagdtiger Snowstorm. The same as this thing. This is not a skin. This is a completely different tank. So if you don't like the camo for this thing, just get a regular T-34, and you can get the Falcon camo, which is a Millennium Falcon style camo. As you can see, I never play this thing because there you go, there's the Millennium Falcon camo. As you can see, I never play the regular T-34 because I've got the Independence T-34. They play exactly the same, they're exactly the same stat-wise, it is just the special skin. And the skin does look nice, I do have to admit. It's nice to roll around in this thing. T-28 Defender. Now, want to talk about an OP tank. This is an OP tank. For most people, it is a T-28 prototype, but with better everything. It has got an auto-loading auto-loading gun, the same as the IS-3 Defender. It has got better side armour than the prototype. It has got an enclosed turret, unlike the prototype. Weak spots are, of course, the hatches. And this thing, it's called a railgun in the stats. And yeah, it's got a 3-shot magazine with a 7.5 second reload between each shell, doing 400 damage. So you can do 1200 damage if all of your shots hit, which is very, very good. Of course, it does retain the good old prototype armour, which is, yeah, very, very nice. And overall, yeah, just it's a good tank destroyer. And people will get upset when you kill them. Yeah, but overall, it is a fun tank to drive. If you can get it, then you should, because, yeah, it's just a good tank destroyer. It's better than the Prot in most ways. Jagdtiger Snowstorm. This thing was never supposed to go back onto sale, but then I think they eventually got bored and just released it, so of course I picked it up. And it's just your regular old Jagdtiger 88. It's a Jagdtiger at tier 8, that's all you can really say about it. You can use either the 88 or the 105. The 88 is the worst gun in terms of most things. The only thing it differs is in a better reload time, slightly better DPM, and slightly better dispersion and aim time, but even so, the 105 has still got a .29 accuracy for better most things. But it's called a Jagdtiger 88, so of course I'm going to stick with the 88mm gun. That's the only reason I stick with it, otherwise I would go with the 105. Overall though, this thing plays exactly the same as a Jagdtiger. If you can get yourself into a good Jagdtiger spot, you'll do well in this tank as you would in the Jagdtiger at tier 9. The only difference is of course the Snowstorm's camo, which you can't remove because, like the T-34 Independence, yeah, it's locked to be that camo. Otherwise, if you have a regular Jagdtiger 88, you'll find no differences. IS-3 Defender is the companion to the T-28 Defender. World of Tanks Blitz has built a little bit of lore around these tanks. Overall, it's a fun tank. It's just an IS-3 with an autoloader. If you like your IS-3, you'll like your IS-3 Defender, I would have to say. It's got exactly the same sort of gun, 3 shots on the magazine, 7.5 second reload between each of them, and they do 440 average damage, I think. Don't quote me on that, and I can't bother to look it up. It's got exactly the same weak spots as the IS-3. I think it differs in some places, but I can't be bothered to look it up, and I don't know what they are. But overall, it's just, yeah, your fun old IS-3 to drive, just with an autoloader. IS-2SH is a very weird one. I really do not know how to play this tank. The turret is not that great in terms of armour. The gun does fire APCR as standard, with heat as its premium, which is pretty cool. You can sort of side-scrape it, you can sort of not side-scrape it. I honestly have no idea how you're supposed to play this tank. I know people do well in it, but I just have no idea what to do in it. It does get a nice camo on it, though. And I got this tank when it was first released, and I still don't know how to play it since then. So there you go. KV-5. You can't go wrong with the KV-5. 100 tons of tank travelling 40 kilometers an hour. It is the ramming machine, which is why people drive the KV-5. It also has a choice of 2 different guns. You've got the original gun, like it has on PC, or you have this upgraded gun, which is a worse rate of fire, but for better penetration, like the IS-6. Weak spots are, of course, the 2 guns here, or not the 2 guns, well, 2 little turrety things. You've got the driver's thing there, and then a sort of little machine gunny area here. Overall, though, it's just your KV-5. How can you go wrong with it? I got this thing ages ago, and it's just great fun to ram people and do loads of damage to them for no damage to you in return, because you've got so much armour, and you travel at 40 kilometers an hour and you weigh 100 tons that you just do so much ramming damage with this thing. It's crazy. Defender Mark 1. Now, this is basically a Centurion, but with a bit of spaced armour on the side here, and an auto-loading gun. It has a 4-shot magazine, I believe. 4-shot 20-pounder, which is very nice, and I do enjoy driving this thing. It's just an auto-loading Centurion. If you own a Centurion and you always thought to yourself, boy, this would work so much better with an auto-loader, well, now you can, because you've got the Defender. That's all this really is. If you like the Cent, you'll like this thing. Not too much more to say about it. Chieftain T95. I got this thing in the Blitz Fair, and I was very happy about it. It is a Chieftain hull with a T95 turret, which comes with all of its same weak spots, aka this thing, the little machine gun on top, and it also has a 90mm gun, and overall it's pretty decent heavy tank. Honestly, if you can hide this thing, you can bounce shots off of your frontal armour because it is very nicely sloped. So yeah, you can bounce off of that thing. Your turret armour as well, very nice. Obviously, the only weak spot is really this thing. Overall, though, it does get this heritage skin, which is very nice. Type 59, got this thing ages ago, and then I rebought it just to get the special skin. I know, I shouldn't have done that, but I really wanted the ding skin because it looks amazing. It's got that sort of Chinese, old-like Chinese copper type design with all of the engravings and the studding. It just looks lovely. And obviously, it's a Type 59. If you've ever played the Type 59 or indeed the T-54 or anything like that, you'll be perfectly at home with this tank. Nothing much too more to say about it. It is a rare tank on PC, which is why I got it on Blitz when I could. T-34-3. I'm surprised at how much I like this tank. It is, you know, just your regular T-34-2, I believe, in the tech tree. Hull armour is nothing to really write home about. Turret armour is 190. It is also pretty well sloped. But the aim time, 2.6 seconds with 0.37 accuracy. The aim time is what makes this tank, honestly. Honestly, the gun on this thing is just very fun to drive, very fun to play, because the aim time is just so quick to aim in. You can just easily just snap a shot onto the target, just bang, aim for like 2 seconds, then fire, and you'll be at your maximum accuracy. It's great, honestly. Very fun tank to drive. Overall, though, it's just your regular old medium tank. AMX M449. I've always meant to do a review on this thing. I have it on PC, and it's fun. On Blitz, it's also pretty fun. Pretty decent armor. You get this then the nice French skin, which doesn't look as nice on Blitz as it does on PC. It just looks a bit fuzzy, like it's not quite like it hasn't been quite HD'd properly or put in properly. Weak spot is of course the Commander's Cupola. Overall, though, does have a very nice 90mm French gun. And yeah, it's just your good old M449. Super Pershing. Got this thing from a crate, I do believe. I never actually purchased it. But I got it from a crate, and I also got the legendary camo for this thing, which changes some of these things to look more like old metal, which they've just stuck onto the front of a Pershing. Which is a bit funny. It's sort of like your fat medium. It doesn't have that great mobility. It works a bit like a heavy tank, but not. Weak spot is up here, behind this thing. The commander's hatch right there is the weak spot. You can kind of go through the frontal armour if you do have enough penetration, but this thing does count as spaced armour. Not sure how much, but you can go through it if you can just raw penetration your way through it. Otherwise, yeah, you can pen with HE at the back. Most American tanks at high tiers are like that. Yeah, otherwise it's a pretty fun tank to drive. I've got my American Eagle on it. Pretty fun. T95E2. This is a medium tank, which not a lot of people like, and it doesn't have the great play stats, apparently. And I kind of see why. It's got the big weak spot up there. You can kind of bounce things off of your armour, off your frontal hull armour. The gun itself is fairly decent, I think. The turret is basically what you've got in the 59 pattern, if anyone has that tank. Overall, though, I'm not a medium tank person. I'm not exactly the best authority on these things, but there it is. T28, called the worst tank at tier 8 and the worst TD at tier 8. Honestly, I don't know why. I like this tank. I think it's far better than the Doom Turtle. Changed my mind. As I've got a very nice gun on it, the armour, you can bounce things. You obviously have got the weak spot down there and up there, but overall I find that the armour works much better at this tier than it does at tier 9, and I don't know how that works, but honestly, yeah, I don't know why people don't like this tank. I like it. It doesn't have that great... It has terrible mobility and the side armour is terrible, but the gun is pretty quick to fire. It's got something like a 7-second reload on it, which is not too bad for doing 400 damage at this tier. And overall, yeah, just a pretty fun tank. I don't know why people don't like it. More people should. The Le Kampfpanzer. This thing was released for the Twister Cup, and it's been released a couple of times. As you can see, I've got the Twister Cup camo all on it. I think that's actually, yeah, it's a legendary camo for this thing. It goes up to the Cruel Twist designation. Overall, though, very nice light tank. It's just an M41 Walker Bulldog with a 90mm gun, and it also gets the high explosive plastic rounds HE, which have got very good pen. They've got something like 100 pen or something, which is why you'll see a lot of people firing HE from this thing, because it can do a lot of damage. Same as the Hesh on the FV4202, the British tier 10 medium. Yeah, it's got very good high explosive pen on this thing. Otherwise, it plays exactly like a Bulldog. So if you like the Bulldog, you'll like this thing. Panther 2 and Panther 88 recently got a buff, and it's great. I do enjoy playing this thing now a lot more, now that it's had an armour buff, because you can actually bounce things, and people are still adjusting to it. It's got the same sort of small term turret, so you can bounce things off of that. The frontal hull armour has been buffed, like I say, so you can now bounce things off of that. It's got a decent 88mm gun on it, and overall it's just a bigger Panther. If you like the Panther, you'll probably like this thing. And overall, yeah, it's a pretty nice medium tank. VK. People call this thing the most OP tier 8, and I can understand why, most certainly. It is the new heavy tank line, super heavy line, heading to the mouse. Changed it up. Weak spot is the lower glacis and the cupola. That's really all you got. And you got like sort of like the strip in the middle of the cheeks here. Those are the only real weak spots. Otherwise, you will bounce quite easily off of this thing. The gun as well does something like 440 average damage or something. It is amazing. It's a 128 at this tier, which is great. Yeah, very strong armour all around. Honestly, I can see why people call this thing the most OP thing at tier 8. It is very good. Tiger 2, however, that got a buff at some point. Lower glacis is now as thick as the upper glacis, which really helps with survivability of this thing, because people still aim for the lower glacis and they can't pen. Overall, though, very good at side scraping, very good at front scraping. I love myself my Tiger 2. If there was one tank at tier 8 that I'd like to say I'm very good at, it would have to be the King. Very good 105mm gun. It even got this special camo, which blends in perfectly with my ladder attachment. And overall, yeah, the Tiger 2 is just one of the best tanks at tier 8 now. Now, I'm very happy with them. Scorpion G. Lots of people don't like the Scorpion G. And it's easy to see why. It's very mobile. It has got no armour. However, it does have a very good 128mm gun. And it's that combination that makes people hate this tank. Overall, I can understand exactly why people don't like it. No armour. You will get penned by HE very easily. The gun is very nice, however. Decent rate of fire, very good pen, very good average damage. Obviously get it when you can, because it's a Scorpion G. Everyone knows the reputation of the Scorpion G as a very good tank destroyer. Ferdinand. I like the Ferdy. Once you get the 128 unlocked on it, it's a decent tank destroyer. It retains the Tiger P frontal chassis, so you of course get 200mm there, and then I think this is something like 250. You can kind of bounce things off your side, but obviously it's not designed for it. Works well as a hull down position. got a very nice 128 on it. Overall, just, yeah, a very fun tank to play. And it's the comparison to the Rheinmetall Borsig. In being that this is the fixed. Actually, no, you've also got two fixed gun tank destroyers in the German line, the Jagdpanther 2 and this thing, and of course I have the 30. IS-6 is not as good as it used to be, I suppose you could say. It did get a different gun, so you have got like the KV-5. It's got a different gun on it, so you can choose to either have the original one with worse pen but higher DPM, or better pen but worse DPM. There you go. You can still bounce things off of it. Obviously, the armour is still relatively difficult. However, there is no way of really angling it the best to get it all working, because as soon as you angle one plate, another one becomes a weak spot. In this case, it would be this, or this, or this, I suppose. Lower glacis is, of course, the weak spot, and you've also got this area up here with the cupolas. That's also a weak spot. Overall, though, it's an alright tank. I still do like the IS-6. I've got the special Pioneer attachment and the legendary camo for it, so yeah, it's alright. 112 Glacial. Hardly anyone talks about this thing anymore. It is the better tank out of the two, the Blaze and this thing. This thing is better. It's got decent frontal hull. It also got a gun boost like the others that brought it more in line with the meta, so it no longer has the 175, which was the biggest problem, where it only had 175 mil of pen on its AP. Now gets APCR and heat, which is very nice. Turret, very nice. I got this thing along with the Blaze when it was first released in the event. Obviously, cupolas are the weak spot. Lower glacis is a weak spot. Otherwise, everyone will bounce off your frontal upper glacis, and also off your sides. It's a fairly decent tank, heavy tank now, but no one really talks about it. FCM-50T, medium tank. It's a heavy tank in PC, and I thought it was a heavy tank in Blitz, but they must have dropped it down at some point. Yeah, I only really got this thing for the football camo, and I don't really use the football camo. Yeah, how's that? So yeah, there you go. I unlocked them so that I have them, but otherwise I just don't use them because I just don't want the football. Because I don't want the names or the legendary names of it. So instead I just go with the good old-fashioned Steam iOS Android camo for this thing. Overall though, it's a fairly decent tank. You can still kind of use it like a heavy tank, but it's not that great at it. You can kind of bounce things off of your frontal armour and off of your turret, but overall it works decently enough as a medium tank. It's got a nice gun on it as well. Talking of nice gun, MX CDC, Center for Disease Control. I've got the special skin on this thing as well. I don't really play it that much. It's basically a bigger Dracula, or a Dracula is a smaller this thing at a lower tier, which is why the Drac is so OP at that tier, because this thing is very mobile. It's a very mobile medium tank with a decent 90mm gun on it, but it is just a bit big in comparison. There's the 50T, there's the CDC, there's the M4. You can see it is a very big target, but if you can get past that, it is a fairly decent medium tank with, you know, decent enough gun. Both of these tanks have got pretty much the same gun on it, so just so you know. Yeah, not really going to bounce anything off of it. Get it if you want. I'm a collector, so of course I got it. Talking of collector, M4A1 Revaluis, sort of a meme. It's an M4 Sherman with a 105mm gun on it, which is very nice. The gun is very nice. It fires APCR as standard with heat as premium. Amazingly, I have bounced 2 rounds of heat from the gun on a T49 big howitzer, which was very funny because otherwise you're never going to bounce things off the hull. You can bounce things off of your turret because the turret has got this. It is a pretty difficult turret to pen unless you go for the top commander's hatch. Otherwise, yeah, it's just it's an M4 Sherman at tier 8. What can you expect for that? Not that mobile. The only reason you'd really play this thing is for the gun, and the gun is very fun to play with, since it's a bit of a novelty to play as a medium, play as a M4 at this tier. So, dropping to our second to last one, the Kampfpanzer. I got this thing when it was released in the missiles event, and with the T49A, I think everyone remembers that thing, and at some point, I believe this thing was supposed to get high explosive missiles added to it, but they never did. And that might actually be a good thing, because it's the first main battle tank to come into the game. It was a combination between West German and American designers, as you can see, from the chassis being a bit like an M1 Abrams. It fires APCR, heat and HE. The problem with this thing though is that the armour is not that great. You can bounce things off of your frontal hull, and you can kind of bounce things off of your turret. However, it has got this weak spot here, and overall the armour sides and rears is terrible. But also the gun is a bit weird because it can either do 600 damage or 400 damage. It's got a massive different damage range, which is a bit of a problem, because sometimes you can do 400, sometimes you can do 700. It's a very weird gun. But overall though, it is still pretty fun. It is one of the quickest heavy tanks in the game. So yeah, otherwise it's just a pretty decent tank. Drive around it. MX-30, 1ER Prot. Yeah, got this thing ages ago from a crate, I believe, as a collector. Otherwise, it's a pretty decent medium tank, to be honest. Tier 9. Got a very nice gun on it, very mobile. Gun is decent, can kind of work ridgelines. It's got a decent enough gun depression. And overall, yeah, just a decent medium tank if you can get it. T55A. This is a West German T55. It's in the personal reward missions in PC as the 3rd reward tank, but of course in Blitz it's just come out as a hybrid nation tank. Yeah, West German T55. It plays pretty much like a T55, or T54 rather. If you play a T54, you'll know how to play this thing. There's not really too much to say about them. Doom Turtle. Yeah, I have not had fun in this tank, honestly. The 155mm gun on this thing is good. The tank itself, however, I find is worse than the T28, and it's because of these hatches. Honestly, people just pen through those hatches very easily, which negates all of your armour, whereas on the T28 rather, at tier 8, not as many people seem to do that. I don't know why, but I seem to get penned and killed a lot more in this tank than I do in the T28, and I'm not sure why, because I was expecting to love the Doom Turtle, but then I got it and I just did not do well in it. And I'm just not doing well in it, and I don't know why. I'm sure people do obviously like this tank, but honestly, if you wanted to play with a 155, go with a T30. Honestly, would be my suggestion. Mauschen. I do like myself a Mauschen. It is a mouse at tier 9. It does have the weak spot here, and the weak spot here, and the lower glacis, obviously. Otherwise, it's a mouse. You can do exactly the same in this as you can in a mouse. It's got the same good gun handling. It's got the same good gun with the same pen, I do believe. Can't be bothered to check. Obviously, you can still side scrape it off of the side. And overall, yeah, just a very strong, super heavy tank at this tier. It is just a mouse, but not, I think. 4502B, this was my first ever tier 9 tank, because of course I was rushing the mouse, and this thing used to lead to the mouse. And it's a decent tank. You can side scrape in it very nicely because it has got a rear mounted turret. You can also kind of front scrape it. Overall, yeah, still has a 128mm gun, which has got good pen, good damage. Overall, yeah, just a good heavy tank. Obviously it leads to the 7201K now, but otherwise, yeah, it's a decent tank, honestly. You can still side scrape in it. Yeah, obviously the weak spot is the Commander's Cupola. Same as most tanks, all the lower glacis, but overall, yeah, just a fun tank still to drive. E75, I like this thing because it's basically a bigger Tiger II. Lower glacis is actually a weak spot now as well, and it is a lot bigger. Upper glacis, you obviously still bounce things. You can side scrape in this thing very well. It has got very strong side armour. It's like 160 side armour or something. Plus it mounts a 128. It is just a bigger Tiger II. If you like the Tiger II, you'll like this thing like I do. Jagdtiger. 128. Very nice, very rapid fire, best DPM out of everything I think up here. I think the Tortoise might just clutch it out with in terms of DPM, but this thing has got very, very high DPM. It's a Tiger II hull with 250mm upper part here in the fighting compartment, and yeah, it's just a very fun tank. It's a very good tank destroyer. You can kind of also use it as an assault gun, but it's not as designed for it, especially not at this tier where the lower glacis is still a weak spot. But overall though, it is a very, very fun tank. K91 is a decent Russian heavy tank. I never got to grips with it when I got it from a crate, but I've come back to it, and it flooded the matchmaker.
because it got sold in the shop at some point and it flooded the matchmaking because everyone bought it because it's got a 100mm autoloader which does more damage than a normal 100mm, and I don't know why. But the turret is very strong. You can pen through the two bulges right here and here. Lower glacis as well as a big weak spot as well. Otherwise you can just pen through the side, which is pretty easy. However, the autoloader is a very nice autoloader. It's a nice gun. The tank itself is pretty decent as well. The Testudo, it's got a good traverse, good gun arc rather. The weak spot is of course here. If you can hide it behind a building, of course that will negate it. You can bounce things off of your frontal hull. The frontal hull is pretty susceptible to tank destroyers though. Tank destroyers with their higher penetration guns will go through your upper hull, which is a bit of a problem. But otherwise though, it's a fun tank to drive. It is the better super heavy tank destroyer in comparison to the Doom Turtle, I do have to say, and I just enjoy the Tortoise much more than the T-95. Now we come to tier 10, all of the big boys. I'm going to leave that one, and we're going to go from the Death Star. And you'll see why in a moment. So Death Star, how can you not like the Death Star? 183mm gun, it is the biggest gun in the game, does the most damage in the game. You can one-shot a tier 8 tank. You can even one-shot some tier 9s if you're using premium HE or premium HESH. Otherwise though, it's not that great of a tank. The gun is the only reason this thing is any good. Otherwise, if you gave this thing a gun like the 215B, it would not be very good at all. The only reason people play this tank is because they want to do 1800 damage in a single shot, which is why you play this tank, and it is absolutely marvellous and great fun to do that sort of damage in this tank. But overall armour, not that great. Mobility, not that great. Turret, not fully traversable. Yeah. 215B works better as a secondary line heavy tank slash sniper. The armour is not that great for frontal armouring, such as Mouses or E100s. You can't really do that. The turret is pretty strong. This thing is a slight weak spot, however, it is still fairly decently sloped, so it is fairly difficult to pen. The gun itself, though, is a decent gun. The 120mm on this thing is a very nice gun. I got this thing in hopes that it would be replaced by like the Centurion Action 10, or not the Centurion Action 10, or the Carnarvon Action 10 or something. But it wasn't. It was introduced as a tier 8 heavy tank, which is pretty OP. Go figure. So yeah, this is still what we got. Still, even so, it is still fairly decent. I don't know how to play it, but I know that people do know how to play it, and they do very well, so it is a decent tank in the right hands. Jagdpanzer E100 with the second biggest gun in the game, which does, I think, the second amount of damage. I think the third one is the Japanese tank destroyers that were released. I think that has got the third biggest gun and the third most damage in the game. It is just an E100 with an upper casemate and a big 170mm gun. Yeah, it is a very good gun. It's a good tank as well. You can kind of dual roll it. It can be used as a assault tank, or it can work as a tank destroyer. I think tank destroyer suits it more because it does have the old, weak spot of the lower glacis, and it also has only got something like 22 degrees of hull traverse, which is terrible. Otherwise though, the gun is very satisfying to actually, when you actually hit something with it. It sounds nice, and yeah, overall it's a Jagdpanzer E100. People love this tank for a good reason. E100 was my second tank, I believe, yeah, it was my second tier 10 heavy tank to get, and it's still a very good tank. Like the Mouse, you keep your turret in line with your hull as much as you can, and you side scrape it, because this stuff sort of counts as spaced armor, I do believe, and it's fairly difficult to pen unless you're side on. Obviously, this is pretty flat side, can pen straight through, but if you angle it, that's where it comes into play. Lower glacis is of course the weak spot. Upper glacis though, very strong. Overall, very strong tank. It also mounts a 150mm gun, which again is very satisfying to hit people with because it does a lot of damage. And yeah, overall it's a fairly decent medium. This is hardly a medium tank. It's a very decent super heavy tank. Talking of super heavies, the Mouse, my first ever tier 10, and I do still love the Mouse. Yeah, it is amazing. If there's a tier 10 tank I would like to be known for playing well, it would have to be the Mouse. Gun handling on this thing is phenomenal. You can easily snap shots at people and they will reliably hit and pen if you're aiming at the right place to pen. Again, you keep this thing in line with your hull and you side scrape it. It's all about using angles. You can pen through the cheeks of the mouse here. This lower glacis is also the weak spot, but otherwise there's no frontal weak spots, which is very nice. Yeah, very good at side scraping. You can easily absorb heat shells, even if you're angling this thing right. I have absorbed Jagdpanzer heat shells. I have absorbed rockets from rocket tanks in this thing, and it is amazing. The pen is not the best, however, yeah, the gun handling certainly makes up for it. It is very accurate. Gun handling is amazing, and you can easily hit people's weak spots with this thing, which is the good thing. 7201K, the most recent German heavy tank to be released at tier 10 and the worst. I call it the Thinking Man Z100 because it has got the same gun as the E100. It's got decent frontal hull armor. Turret can be annoying to pen, but these things are the same as the side armor, which means that people can go through it and just negate your entire frontal hull armor. Works well as a hull down tank or as a peek-a-boom tank. You need to really be careful when you're planning your moves in this thing, otherwise you will get penned and you will die. You need to really think about where you're positioning this tank to do it well, which is why I call it the Thinking Man Z100. 121B, a crate tank. I got it because it came with this nice camo, and I do like this camo. Again, I'm not that great at driving mediums, but when I do take this thing out, I do try and go with the mediums and do the medium tank thing. Overall, if you've played any of the high-tier Russian, Chinese mediums, you'll be able to play this tank pretty decently. What more can you say? Mark 6 Chieftain. Now this thing. I got this thing from a crate, and I didn't have to buy that many crates to get it either, which I was very pleased about. Plus I've got the Royal camo on it. I don't think it's actually called the Royal camo, but it comes with this nice Union Jack, and it also comes with, Union flag, and it also comes with this sort of urban camo, which is very nice. Overall, very nice heavy tank. People have wanted this thing in PC for ages, and they're releasing it for everything but PC, which I think is very funny. Turret is very strong. Upper glacis is also pretty strong. Lower glacis is of course the weak spot. You can kind of side scrape and you can kind of bounce things off of your side armor, but overall it's got a very nice main gun. 120mm, fires APR or APCR. Go figure. I think it's actually APDS for the premium rounds. Armor piercing, discarding sabot. But yeah, overall though, it's a very nice heavy tank. Definitely drive it when you can, or get it when you can rather. It was released into the shop at some point. Now the M60, everyone knows this is a 200-pound tank, at least. This thing gets snatched up as soon as it comes into the shop, or as soon as it comes into like the Blitz fair, for example. It'll be released for like 200 quid and it'll be sold out the minute it comes into sale. I got this thing. You know when you get those pop-ups which are like one-day exclusives, and it's like, oh, you can get this tank for a certain amount of time, or you can buy this thing for a certain amount of time. I got this thing in a pop-up, and it wasn't 100 quid like the Shinobi. This thing, I got this thing for the same amount as I would pay for about a T-34. Maybe not quite that cheap, but it was like 50 quid. And in comparison to what this thing actually goes for, that's a bargain. So of course when I got that pop-up and it was like, yeah, you want to pay 55 quid for this thing? I was like, hell yeah. Because this thing is one of the rarest tanks I think to see on the battlefield, and maybe it'll flood the matchmaker now that people get that pop-up, maybe. But M60, and I got this thing very cheap. I haven't played it because I'm recording this literally as the minute after I bought this thing. I got this, but yeah, comes with the legendary camo. What more can you say? It's an American medium tank. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, haven't played this thing, so I don't know what it's like. Haven't checked out the stats or anything. All I know is that looks something like a 90mm gun or a 105mm gun. It's a bit like the pattern. But yeah, so there you go. That's my garage tour. Again, a very long video. It's going to be like 40 gigs on my computer until I can upload this thing. But yeah, there you go. That's all of my tanks from tiers 6 to 10 on my garage tour. So yeah, I'll thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and goodbye.